Lily lived in Belmont, a small and tranquil town in the Elm State. She was a girl who went largely unnoticed by most, except for one peculiar thing: she always wore a box on her head. The townspeople were accustomed to seeing her this way, yet no one truly knew why they called her the girl with the box, nor did anyone ever ask her about the reason she chose to wear it. However, Lily wasn't always like this. She used to be a typical happy girl, playing with her friends, laughing together, and attending school every day just like other children. She loved running through the streets of Belmont, especially with her best friend, Mia. They would laugh so hard their stomachs would ache. Lily's family was small but affectionate. Her father, Mr. Thompson, worked at a local carpentry shop, and her mother, Mrs. Thompson, sold fruits at the market. Lily had a younger brother, Leo, who was still in elementary school. They were a close-knit family, and Lily had always been a cheerful child. Everything changed when Lily turned 13. That was the year she started high school, and while things were supposed to be exciting, high school brought her something unexpected: a crush. His name was Ethan, and he was the most popular boy in her class. All the girls liked him, and even the boys admired him. He was tall, intelligent, and had a smile that could make anyone stop and stare. Lily was no different. She couldn't stop thinking about Ethan, even though they hardly spoke. She admired him from a distance, hoping that one day he would notice her. One afternoon after school, Lily made a brave decision. She decided she was going to tell Ethan how she felt. She had seen it happen in movies, how the girl confesses her feelings to the boy, and the boy says something sweet, leading to a happily ever after. Lily believed this would be her story too. With her heart racing, she wrote a short letter confessing her feelings and bought a small gift, a beautiful keychain she thought he would like. After school, she approached Ethan with shaky hands and gave him the letter and the gift. Her friends watched from a distance, whispering and giggling. Ethan took the letter, opened it, and read it for a moment. Lily thought maybe things were going to go well, but then something terrible happened. Ethan didn't smile or thank her. Instead, he burst into laughter. "What is this?" he asked, showing the letter to his friends who had gathered around. "Are you serious, Lily? You must be joking. You are the ugliest girl I've ever seen. You should put a bag over your head and hide your face." Those words hit Lily like a heavy blow. She stood frozen, her legs felt weak, and her heart broke into pieces. Ethan threw the letter on the ground and walked away with his friends still laughing. Lily's friends, who had been watching, didn't defend or comfort her. Instead, they giggled too, unsure of what to say. Lily felt humiliated, tears filling her eyes as she ran home, leaving everything behind: the letter, the gift, and her dignity. From that day on, Lily changed. She didn't want to go to school anymore, stopped talking to her friends, and avoided everyone. She felt ugly, just as Ethan had called her, believing that everyone saw her the same way, a girl who should hide her face. Lily stopped looking at herself in the mirror, unable to bear seeing her reflection. She began spending more and more time in her room, locking herself away from the world. Eventually, she found an old cardboard box in her father's workshop. It seemed perfect for hiding her face from everyone. She cut 2 holes for her eyes and placed the box over her head. For Lily, the box became her safe haven. As long as it covered her face, no one could judge her or call her ugly. She started wearing it everywhere and soon stopped going to school altogether. Lily's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, were worried. They didn't understand why their daughter, who used to be so cheerful and full of life, had changed so suddenly. They asked what was wrong, but Lily refused to talk about it. She didn't want to tell them about the terrible things Ethan had said or let them know she felt like the ugliest girl in the world. Weeks passed, and Lily stayed at home wearing the box every day. Her father decided it was best for her to study from home, thinking she just needed time to heal. But time didn't help Lily. She felt worse each day. Days turned into weeks, and Lily still didn't leave the house. The cardboard box had become a part of her life. She never took it off, not even at home. Her mother, Mrs. Thompson, would knock on Lily's door with food or to check on her, but Lily barely responded. "My dear, what's wrong? Why won't you talk to me?" her mother asked through the door, her voice filled with worry. But Lily never gave a clear answer. She didn't want to talk about Ethan or the cruel words that still echoed in her mind. Mr. Thompson was just as worried. He had tried to talk to Lily, but she always brushed him off, saying, "I'm fine." He knew his daughter wasn't fine, but she wouldn't tell him what had happened. The lively, happy girl who used to laugh and play with her friends had become quiet and withdrawn. She hardly left her room and refused to go to school. The box on her head was a constant reminder that something was deeply wrong. The only person Lily still spoke to was her younger brother, Leo. He was just 11 years old and didn't understand what his sister was going through, but he loved her. He always tried to cheer her up. Every now and then, Leo would visit Lily in her room, sit beside her, and talk about his day at school. Though she barely responded, Leo's stories made her feel a little better. His energy and love were the only things that made her smile. "Lily, why do you wear this box all the time?" Leo asked one afternoon as he sat on the floor next to her bed. Lily didn't answer for a while, she just stared at the floor. Her voice was soft when she finally replied, "It makes me feel safe." Leo didn't fully understand what she meant, but he didn't push her. He just nodded and then began talking about something funny that happened at school, trying to make Lily laugh. But despite Leo's efforts, Lily was sinking deeper into her own world. She spent most of her time on the internet, chatting with strangers. She felt safer there, behind the screen, no one could see her face, and no one could hurt her. She created anonymous profiles where she could talk to people without fear. They didn't know her story, and she didn't have to explain anything to them. Online, she was just another voice in the crowd. Seeing his daughter in this state, Mr. Thompson became more and more concerned. One evening, as he sat at the dining table watching his wife prepare dinner, he made a decision: he needed help. He didn't know what to do for Lily anymore, so he decided to visit a doctor. The next morning, Mr. Thompson traveled to Arbor to see a doctor who specialized in mental health. He explained Lily's situation to the doctor, describing how she had withdrawn from the world, refused to leave the house, and always wore the box on her head. The doctor listened carefully, nodding as Mr. Thompson spoke. After a while, the doctor said, "What your daughter is experiencing sounds like something called hikikomori. It's a condition where people, especially young ones, isolate themselves from the outside world. It often happens when someone has experienced a deep emotional trauma." Mr. Thompson frowned, confused. "Hikikomori?" The doctor repeated, "It's more common in places like Japan, but it happens here too. Even though we don't often talk about it, people who suffer from this condition feel too scared to leave their homes or face the world. They often create a safe space for themselves, which in your daughter's case seems to be that box on her head. But the longer they stay isolated, the worse it gets." Mr. Thompson's heart sank. He hadn't realized just how bad things were for Lily. "Is there a cure for it?" he asked the doctor. The doctor shook his head. "There's no quick fix. What Lily needs is support, and she needs to start interacting with the outside world again. The more she stays inside, the more she'll withdraw, and it could get to the point where she won't even talk to you anymore. Right now, she's still speaking to her family, which is a good sign, but you need to help her take small steps to come out of her shell. It won't be easy, but she has to face her fears." Mr. Thompson nodded, deep in thought. He knew Lily was scared, but he had no idea things were this serious. He thanked the doctor for his advice and made up his mind: Lily had to go back to school. When Mr. Thompson returned home later that day, he knocked on Lily's door. "Lily, I need to talk to you," he said, his voice serious. Lily was in the middle of chatting with one of her online friends, but she heard the tone in her father's voice and knew it was important. She slowly got up and opened the door. Mr. Thompson looked at her, the box still covering her face, and sighed. He stepped inside and sat down on the edge of her bed. I know you're scared, and I know you don't want to talk about it, but you've been hiding away for too long. It's not good for you, Lily. Lily didn't say anything, she just looked down at the floor, her fingers picking at the edges of the box. I went to see a doctor in Arbor, Mr. Thompson continued. He told me about a condition called hikikomori. It's when someone feels too afraid to leave their home or talk to others. He says you need to face your fears, Lily. You can't keep living like this. Lily's heart sank. She didn't know what her father was talking about, but she knew one thing, she wasn't ready to go outside. I can't, Daddy, she whispered. I'm not ready. Mr. Thompson sighed again. He hated seeing his daughter like this, but he knew he had to be firm. Lily, you have to try. You've been stuck in this room for too long. Tomorrow, you're going back to school. Lily's eyes widened. No, Daddy, please. I can't go back there. I'm not ready. But her father shook his head. You have to face it, Lily. You can't hide forever. Leo will be with you, and I'll drive you there myself. But you're going to school tomorrow. Lily burst into tears. The thought of stepping out of the house, of going back to that school where everyone would laugh at her, was too much to bear. She curled up on her bed, sobbing into her pillow. Mr. Thompson placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. I know it's hard, Lily, but you'll never know if you're ready unless you try. I'll be with you every step of the way. Lily didn't respond. She couldn't, the fear was too overwhelming. Her father stayed with her for a while but eventually left, leaving her alone in her room with her box and her tears. That night, Leo came to check on her. He saw her lying on the bed, her face hidden behind the box, and sat beside her. Don't cry, Lily, Leo said softly. I'll be with you tomorrow. I'll make sure no one laughs at you. Lily wanted to believe him, but the fear was too strong. She couldn't shake the feeling that everyone at school would see her the same way Ethan did, as ugly. She didn't say anything, just nodded weakly, trying to calm herself. As the night went on, Lily lay in bed, her heart racing. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but she was certain of one thing, she wasn't ready. Morning came too soon for Lily. Her eyes were swollen from crying the night before, and her heart was heavy with fear. She hadn't slept much. The thought of going back to school after all these years made her stomach churn. She wished she could disappear or stay hidden forever in her room, but she knew her father wasn't going to change his mind. When it was time to leave, Lily reluctantly put on her box, tightening the straps around her chin, feeling somewhat safer with it on. Leo, her little brother, was waiting by the door, smiling at her as he always did. He held her hand as they walked to the car where their father was waiting to drive them to school. The ride to school was quiet. Lily stared out of the window, trying to calm herself, but nothing seemed to help. Mr. Thompson glanced at her from the front seat, worry lines etched across his forehead. He turned on the car radio, playing some soft music, hoping it would ease Lily's nerves, but she felt like the world was closing in on her. She could hardly breathe under the box. When they arrived at the school gates, Leo jumped out of the car, excited to see his friends. Lily, on the other hand, could barely move. Her legs felt like they were glued to the seat. Her father looked back at her, his voice soft but firm. Lily, you can do this. You'll be okay. Lily did respond. She stared straight ahead, her hands trembling. Leo ran back to the car, took her hand again, and gently pulled her out. Mr. Thompson gave her a reassuring nod before driving off, leaving Lily and Leo standing at the entrance of the school. As soon as they stepped inside the school compound, Lily could feel eyes on her everywhere. She turned, and students were staring at her, whispering, pointing, some laughing quietly behind their hands. Her heart raced, and she gripped Leo's hand even tighter, trying not to run away. She kept her head down, hiding behind the box, praying that no one would approach her. But she could hear the murmurs growing louder. "Isn't that the girl who never comes to school?" someone whispered. "Why does she have a box on her head?" another voice asked, followed by stifled laughter. Lily's chest tightened with fear and anxiety. It all came rushing back, just like on that terrible day with Ethan. She wanted to disappear, to hide somewhere far away, but Leo stayed close, pulling her gently toward the classroom. Inside the classroom, the teacher, Mrs. Funey, had already been informed about Lily's condition. She stood at the front of the room as the students filed in, her eyes filled with understanding and kindness. "Class," she began, her voice firm, "I want all of you to be respectful today. We have a student returning after some time away. Please make her feel welcome." Lily slowly walked to the back of the classroom, her eyes never leaving the floor. She could still hear the whispers, but the teacher's words seemed to keep the students somewhat quiet. She found an empty seat at the back and sat down, pulling her bag onto her lap like a shield. But not everyone was ready to follow the teacher's instructions. Kyle, one of the taller boys in the class, couldn't stop smirking. He was the kind of boy who enjoyed teasing others, especially when there was an easy target. As soon as Mrs. Funey turned her back to write on the board, Kyle leaned over to his group of friends and whispered something that made them all chuckle. Then he turned his attention to Lily. "Hey, Kyle," he called out loud enough for Lily to hear, "why are you wearing that thing on your head? Are you hiding something? Let us see what's under there." Lily's hands clenched into fists under the desk. She felt her heart pounding the same way it had when Ethan had called her ugly all those years ago. She didn't say anything, she didn't even look up. She just stared at her hands, willing the day to end quickly. Kyle wasn't done, though. "Come on, just take it off," he said, his voice teasing. "We all want to see." Before he could say anything more, another voice interrupted him. "Leave her alone, Kyle." Lily looked up to see who had spoken. It was Ben, a boy who sat a few rows ahead. Ben wasn't like the other boys in class. He was quieter and never joined in when the others teased someone. He stood up, now facing Kyle. "She's not bothering you, Kyle," Ben said, his voice calm but firm. "So stop bothering her." Kyle frowned. "What's your problem, Ben?" Ben replied, "I'm just having some fun." "Yeah, fun at someone else's expense," Kyle retorted, not backing down. "Just leave her alone." The tension in the room grew, and some of the other students started whispering to each other. Lily kept her head down, but inside, she felt a small sense of relief. Ben had stood up for her, and for the first time that day, she didn't feel completely alone. Mrs. Funey turned around, sensing the tension. "Kyle, Ben, is there a problem?" Kyle sank back into his seat, mumbling something under his breath. Ben sat down too, giving Lily a quick glance as if to check if she was okay. Lily didn't look up, but she appreciated what Ben had done. No one had stood up for her like that before. When the lunch break came, Lily quietly left the classroom, hoping to find a place where she could be alone. She still wasn't ready to face the crowd. She found a small spot near the school field, away from everyone, and sat down. She pulled out her lunch, but she wasn't hungry. The day had been too stressful. As she sat there, staring at the ground, she heard footsteps approaching. She looked up, her heart racing, afraid that Kyle or someone else had come to tease her again. But it wasn't Kyle, it was Ben. He walked over and sat down next to her without saying anything for a moment. They just sat there in silence. Ben had a strange-looking helmet on his head, and Lily couldn't help but wonder why. After a few moments, Ben smiled and said, "I like this helmet. It makes me feel strong." Lily wasn't sure what to say, but something about his smile made her feel a little better. For the first time that day, she felt a bit safer. Ben wasn't like Kyle or the others, he wasn't there to make fun of her. He was just sitting there, being kind. You don't have to talk if you don't want to, Ben said after a while. But I just wanted to tell you that you don't need to worry about them. People can be mean, but not everyone is like that. Lily nodded slightly, still not ready to speak, but inside, she was grateful. She wasn't used to people being kind to her, not since Ethan had shattered her confidence. But Ben seemed different. He didn't care about what was under her box. He didn't ask her to take it off. He was just there, making her feel less alone. As the lunch break ended, Ben stood up, still smiling. You'll be fine, Lily. I'm your friend now. Lily watched him walk away, her heart feeling lighter for the first time in a long time. Maybe, just maybe, school wouldn't be as terrible as she had imagined. The next few days passed in a blur for Lily. She continued going to school but kept to herself as much as possible. The whispers and stares hadn't stopped, but they had quieted down a bit. Some students still pointed at her as she walked through the halls, but with Ben by her side during lunch, things felt a little easier to handle. Leo, her brother, also stuck close to her, making sure she was never alone. But even though she had Ben and Leo, Lily still felt nervous every time she stepped into the school compound. She could feel the weight of the box on her head and wondered if she would ever have the courage to take it off. Deep down, she wasn't sure she could. One afternoon after school, Lily was walking to the school gate with Leo when she heard raised voices behind her. She stopped and turned to see what was happening. A small crowd of students had gathered in a circle near the school field, their voices excited and tense. What's going on? Lily asked Leo, her curiosity getting the better of her. I don't know, Leo replied, frowning as he watched the growing crowd. Let's go check it out. As they approached the group, Lily could hear Kyle's loud and angry voice coming from the middle of the crowd. Her heart sank. Kyle was always getting into trouble, and today was no different. Pushing through the crowd, Lily saw what was happening. Kyle was in the middle of the group, facing off against Ben. The two boys were glaring at each other, their fists clenched, ready to fight. What's wrong with you, Ben? Kyle shouted, his voice full of anger. Why are you always defending that girl with the box? What do you care what happens to her? Ben stood his ground, his voice calm but firm. Leave her alone, Kyle. She's not bothering anyone. Why do you have to make everything worse? The students around them started whispering, excited to see a fight. Lily's stomach twisted as she realized what was about to happen. Kyle wasn't going to back down, and Ben, though calm, wasn't going to walk away either. Without warning, Kyle threw the first punch. It landed hard on Ben's shoulder, knocking him back a step. The crowd gasped, and Lily's heart jumped into her throat. She wanted to scream to tell them to stop, but the words were stuck in her throat. Ben recovered quickly and swung back at Kyle. His fist connected with Kyle's jaw, and the bigger boy stumbled. The crowd erupted in shouts and cheers as the two boys went at each other, punching and grappling, neither willing to back down. Lily's hands shook as she watched the fight unfold. She didn't want this. Ben was only trying to defend her, but now he was getting hurt because of her. She felt powerless, standing on the edge of the crowd, watching it all happen. Suddenly, Lily felt someone grab her arm. She turned to see Leo, his face full of concern. Lily, we need to get help, he said, pulling her away from the fight. But before they could move, two teachers rushed over, pushing through the crowd. They grabbed Kyle and Ben, pulling them apart before the fight could get any worse. Kyle wiped blood from his mouth, still glaring at Ben. This isn't over, Ben, Kyle growled as the teachers dragged him away. Ben didn't say anything, he just wiped sweat from his forehead, breathing heavily. The crowd began to disperse as the teachers led Kyle and Ben toward the principal's office. Lily watched them go, her heart still racing. She wanted to run after Ben to thank him for standing up for her again, but she felt frozen in place. Lily, are you okay? Leo asked. Lily nodded slowly, but inside, she didn't feel okay. She felt guilty. Ben had gotten into a fight because of her, because Kyle wouldn't stop teasing her, and now Ben was probably going to get into trouble with the principal. Later that day, Lily was walking home alone when she heard footsteps behind her. She turned and saw Kyle, his face still bruised from the fight, walking toward her. Her heart skipped a beat. She wanted to run, but something about the look on Kyle's face stopped her. He wasn't smirking or teasing like he usually did. He looked serious, almost angry, but not in the way Lily had expected. Without saying a word, Kyle grabbed Lily's wrist and pulled her behind a small building away from the main road. Lily's breath caught in her throat as she struggled to pull away from him, but Kyle's grip was too strong. "What are you doing, Lily?" she asked, her voice trembling. Kyle didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached for the box on Lily's head. Before she could stop him, he ripped it off, exposing her face to the open air. Lily froze, standing there paralyzed as Kyle stared at her face in silence for a long moment. He didn't say anything, he just looked at her, his eyes wide with surprise. Lily's mind raced. She was waiting for the insult, waiting for Kyle to call her ugly like Ethan had all those years ago. But instead, Kyle did something she never expected. "You're not ugly," he said quietly, almost as if he couldn't believe the words coming out of his own mouth. "Why do you hide your face? You're beautiful." Lily stared at him, her mind reeling. Was this some kind of trick? Was he mocking her? She couldn't understand why Kyle of all people would say something like that. Kyle, still holding the box, shook his head slowly. "I don't get it. Why are you wearing this thing? You don't need it." Lily's throat tightened, and she couldn't find the words to respond. She wasn't used to hearing words like this from someone who had teased her for so long. Before she could react, Kyle handed the box back to her, glanced at her one more time, and then turned and walked away, leaving Lily standing there in shock. For a long time, Lily didn't move. She just stood there, holding the box in her hands, trying to process what had just happened. Kyle had seen her face, and he hadn't called her ugly, he had said she was beautiful. That night, as Lily lay in bed, she thought about what Kyle had said. Beautiful was a word she hadn't heard in years, not since Ethan had shattered her self-confidence. Was it possible that she wasn't as ugly as she thought? Could Kyle really have meant what he said? The questions swirled in her mind, but no matter how much she thought about it, she couldn't find an answer. All she knew was that something had changed, and she wasn't sure what to do next. The next day, Lily woke up feeling confused. Kyle's words from the day before echoed in her mind, "You're beautiful." She still couldn't believe he had said that. Was it a trick? Had he been trying to make fun of her in some twisted new way? She didn't know what to think. As she got ready for school, she hesitated before putting the box on her head for the first time in years. She wondered if she needed it, but the fear of facing her classmates without it was too strong, so she tied it on tightly, just like always. When she arrived at school, things felt different. Ben was waiting for her by the gate, his face bruised from the fight with Kyle. He smiled at her, though it was a tired smile. "How are you, Lily?" he asked, walking beside her. Lily didn't know how to answer. She wanted to tell Ben about what Kyle had said, but she didn't know if she could trust anyone with that secret. Instead, she just nodded. "I'm okay. Thanks for standing up for me," she said quietly. Ben shrugged. "Kyle had it coming, besides, you deserve better than the way he's been treating you." They walked in silence for a while before Lily spoke again. "Ben, why did you defend me? You didn't have to." Ben stopped walking and looked at her, his eyes sincere. "Because you don't deserve to be treated like that, Lily. No one does. I don't care what anyone else thinks about your box or why you wear it. You're a good person, and that's all that matters." Lily felt a warmth spread through her chest at Ben's words. He had been kind to her from the start, never asking why she wore the box or pressuring her to take it off. He accepted her just as she was. "Thanks, Ben," Lily said softly, feeling grateful for his friendship. They made their way to class, and Lily tried her best to focus on the lessons, but her thoughts kept drifting back to Kyle. She couldn't stop thinking about the way he had looked at her, surprised, almost confused, and then there were his words, "You're not ugly. You're beautiful." Why would Kyle of all people say that? During lunch, Lily found a quiet spot under a tree to sit and think. She wasn't in the mood to be around too many people and needed some time alone to make sense of everything. As she sat there, staring at the ground, she heard a voice. "Lily." She looked up to see Ben standing in front of her, holding 2 sandwiches. He handed one to her with a small smile. "I thought you might be hungry," he said. Lily took the sandwich, surprised but thankful. "You didn't have to," she said. Ben shrugged and sat down beside her. "I wanted to," he replied simply. They ate in silence for a while, and then Ben spoke again. "You've been quiet today. Is everything okay?" Lily hesitated. She wanted to tell him about Kyle, but she wasn't sure if she was ready. But as she looked at Ben, she realized that he was someone she could trust. He had always been kind to her, never pushing her or making her feel uncomfortable. "There's something I need to tell you," Lily said. Ben looked at her. "What is it?" Lily took a deep breath and told him everything, how Kyle had taken off her box, how he had seen her face, and how instead of calling her ugly like she had expected, he had said she was beautiful. Ben listened quietly, not interrupting. When Lily finished, he stayed silent for a moment, thinking. "Lily," he said softly, "maybe Kyle wasn't trying to make fun of you this time. Maybe he actually meant what he said." Lily looked at him. "But why? He's been teasing me for weeks. Why would he suddenly say something like that?" Ben shrugged. "Maybe seeing your face made him realize that he was wrong. People can change, you know. Maybe he's starting to see you differently." Lily didn't know what to say. The idea that Kyle might actually mean what he said was hard for her to accept. For so long, she had believed she was ugly and that no one would ever see her as anything else. How could Kyle, who had teased her so cruelly, now be saying she was beautiful? As they sat there, a group of students passed by, laughing and chatting. Lily pulled her box down a little lower, feeling self-conscious. "You don't have to hide anymore," Ben said quietly. "You're stronger than you think. You don't need that box." Lily looked at him. She had worn the box for so long, it had become a part of her, her protection, her shield. But now, for the first time, she was beginning to wonder if maybe she could live without it. That evening, Lily sat in her room, staring at herself in the mirror. The box was still on her head, but her hands hovered over the straps, unsure if she should take it off. She thought about what Ben had said and about Kyle's words too. Could they really be telling the truth? Slowly, Lily untied the straps and lifted the box off her head. She stared at her reflection, her heart beating fast. It had been so long since she had looked at her own face. For years, she had avoided mirrors, convinced that her reflection would only bring her pain. But as she looked at herself now, Lily didn't see the ugly girl she had imagined for so long. She saw someone different, someone stronger, someone who had faced years of pain and was still standing. Maybe she wasn't ugly after all. Lily felt something she hadn't felt in a long time, hope. The next morning, Lily did something she never thought she would do. She walked to school without her box. As she entered the school compound, she felt the eyes of her classmates on her just like they always were, but this time, she didn't feel the same fear. She held her head high, her heart racing, but there was no turning back now. Students whispered as she passed by, but it wasn't the same kind of whispers she was used to. This time, the whispers weren't full of mockery, they were full of surprise, even admiration. "She's so pretty," one of the girls said, her voice loud enough for Lily to hear. "Is that Lily?" another student asked, clearly shocked. "She's beautiful." Lily's heart pounded, but she kept walking. She was unused to this kind of attention. It felt strange but also good. For so long, she had believed she was ugly, but now, hearing these words, she realized that maybe she had been wrong. When she reached the classroom, Ben was waiting for her. His eyes widened in surprise when he saw her without the box, but then he smiled. "You did it," he said, his voice full of pride. "I knew you could." Lily smiled back. Ben had believed in her when she didn't believe in herself, and now, here she was, standing in front of him without the box, ready to face the world. "I knew you didn't need that box," Ben said. Lily smiled shyly. "Thanks, Ben. I couldn't have done this without you." They walked into class together, and although the usual stares followed them, Lily noticed something different today. Instead of laughter or teasing, her classmates seemed curious, even impressed. Whispers filled the room as she made her way to her seat, but no one said anything directly to her until Kyle walked in. The moment he saw Lily, his steps slowed. His usual cocky smirk was gone, replaced by something else, surprise, maybe even guilt. He stood there for a second, staring at her. Lily felt her heart skip a beat, but this time, she didn't look away. She met his gaze head-on, determined not to let him intimidate her. "Kyle," she said, trying to keep her voice steady, "what do you want?" Kyle shuffled his feet, clearly uncomfortable. I wanted to apologize," he said, his eyes not quite meeting hers. "For everything, for the teasing, for taking off your box the other day. I was wrong, Lily." Lily blinked, taken aback. An apology was the last thing she had expected. "I didn't mean to hurt you," Kyle continued, his voice low. "I don't know why I did it, but when I saw your face that day, I realized how wrong I was. You're not ugly, Lily. You never were. I guess I didn't know how to handle it." Lily felt a lump forming in her throat. For years, she had carried the weight of those cruel words that had shattered her confidence, and now hearing this apology from Kyle, one of the people who had contributed to her pain, stirred something deep inside her. But it wasn't anger. It was a mix of emotions she couldn't quite place: relief, confusion, even a bit of forgiveness. "Why did you do it, Kyle?" Lily asked quietly. "Why did you tease me all this time?" Kyle sighed, looking down at the ground. "I don't know. I guess I thought it was funny at first, but then it just became a habit. And when Ben stood up for you, it made me realize how wrong I was. I'm sorry, Lily." Lily didn't say anything for a moment. She thought back to the day Ethan had called her ugly, how those words had shaped her for so long. And now here was Kyle, asking for forgiveness, admitting he was wrong. After a long pause, Lily finally spoke. "Thank you for apologizing, Kyle. But you need to understand your words hurt me. I wore that box for so long because I believed what you and Ethan said. I thought I was ugly. I didn't think I deserved to be seen." Kyle looked up, his eyes filled with regret. "I'm really sorry, Lily. I wish I could take it all back." Lily nodded. "I can't forget what happened, but I can forgive you. I won't let you or anyone else make me feel that way again." Kyle nodded slowly. "I understand. I'll leave you alone from now on. I'm really sorry, Lily." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving Lily standing there with a weight lifted off her shoulders. It wasn't just Kyle's apology that made her feel lighter, it was the realization that she now had the power. She didn't need the box anymore, not to hide, not to protect herself. Ben walked up to her, his face full of concern. "Are you okay, Lily?" Lily smiled, feeling a sense of peace she hadn't felt in years. "Yeah, Ben. I'm okay." That evening, when Lily returned home, she sat quietly by the window, watching the sun set over the small town of Belmont. The box, which had been a constant part of her life for so many years, now sat folded in the corner of her room. She no longer needed it. She no longer needed to hide. Her father walked into the room, noticing the change in her expression. "Are you all right, Lily?" he asked gently, sitting beside her. Lily nodded, a small smile forming on her lips. "I'm fine, Daddy. I don't need the box anymore. I'm done hiding." Mr. Thompson's eyes filled with pride as he wrapped his arms around his daughter. "You're strong, Lily. Stronger than I could ever imagine." Lily smiled, leaning into her father's embrace. She had come a long way from the girl who believed she was too ugly to show her face. Now, she was ready to face the world, confident, free, and no longer shackled by the words of others. Moral of the story. Lily's journey teaches us an important lesson: words have power. The cruel words Ethan and Kyle said to her had haunted her for years, trapping her in a prison of self-doubt and insecurity. Hurtful words can damage a person's heart, leaving scars that take years to heal. For Lily, those words made her believe she wasn't worthy of being seen. But with the support of people like Ben and her family, Lily learned that she was not defined by the opinions of others. She found her strength, forgave those who hurt her, and realized that true beauty comes from within. This story reminds us to be careful with the words we use. A simple insult or joke can cause lasting pain, even if it's said in the heat of the moment. We must treat each other with kindness and understanding, knowing that our words can either build someone up or tear them down. Let us choose to speak words that lift people, not ones that weigh them down.